Nada, so you can share your screen and start when you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see the get task okay.
Okay, great. So yes, today I will be talking about generating API documentation using Spring REST docs. And first I have these two slides here. I will make a quick comparison with Swagger as a tool for generating documentation, just to see the main difference and give you an idea of how we are going to write this documentation. Quickly, traditionally, the most popular tool for generating documentation is Swagger, because it automatically detects all of our controllers' input and output parameters, and we can have generated documentation without any handwriting. However, if we want to add some more information about the parameters, describe the response in this example, we need to add all these annotations in the code, which where we would add these descriptions. The most of our controllers and models will have plugged all these annotations, and the code becomes hard to read. Specifically on this example, only the highlighted lines here are part of the actual REST controller. In comparison of this, when we use Spring REST docs, these informations are plugged elsewhere, actually in the tests. So this is how Spring MVC tests looks like for the same REST endpoint. And this part here is exactly what we can achieve in Swagger by having the annotations. So in the document function, we have response fields filled with path and description. So this is how it can be done in the Spring MVC tests using REST docs. And we will talk about this in more detail in a second. The main benefit we have by having the documentation part of the tests, it is that it will always be accurate. Meaning, as soon as the implementation of the API has changed, the build will fail and we need to fix the tests. If there is a field added or removed, the documentation part also asserts these fields, and it will complain for undocumented field, and we would need to fix this. That way, we won't have any outdated documentation, which we do not want. Next, I will go into some more examples, and I will try to explain how we can write these tests, how the documentation is generated, and some extra features that we can get by using Spring REST docs, such as generated Spring Cloud contracts, or generated warmbox stubs, but for that in a second. So here we can see an example of tests which would be included in RCase process microservice. I will try to push the code by the end of the day. If you're interested, you can find these examples on GitLab. All of my test classes are extending this base abstract class, REST API test. First, I should mention that for writing these tests, we need this dependency, Spring REST docs mock MVC, since our tests are a Spring mock MVC tests. There is also a dependency Spring REST docs rest assured if you have written tests with rest assured. What's important here is this extends a bit. Besides the regular Spring extension class that we had for Spring mock MVC tests, we have a REST documentation extension. With this configuration, the default output of the generated snippets in this case is in my target folder. There is generated snippets directory. So this can also be configured if you want some custom output. Something else worth mentioning is this annotation, web MVC test. The tests are only going to instantiate the web layer, not the whole Spring context. It's where Spring handles the incoming requests and hands it off to your controller. So the test would only make mock HTTP requests and assert the responses. And something else for building the mock MVC, we need to apply the REST documentation configuration. That is also the important part for configuring your tests. For the test examples, the task API controller needs this service, so it's injected as a mock bin here. Let's look into the test. So this test particularly tests GET request on this URL cross tasks, and we expect the response to be with status OK, content type application JSON. So a regular mock MVC test. And in this section here, we are adding a part that would generate the documentation. So document function takes identifier. We are saying how the output directory will be called for the generated snippets. And as soon as I run these tests, I get these folders here created. So I have get tasks folder here. And we will document the response fields of the response body that from this endpoint, and that is a field with name message, which is always null in this case, and field with named data, which is array, is the description list of process user tasks. So if I run these tests in this folder, as I said, I get these snippets here generated. And let's see what's in here. So we have example request for curl client or HTTP client. There is also the HTTP request documented and how the response body looks like. So this is the JSON response from calling the cross tasks endpoint. And also, this is the additional part that we have added here in the test. So if you remember response fields, so we get here this table where we have the information we added for message and data field. Most importantly, if I comment this line and run this test, we should see that the test will fail since we have undocumented field part of the response, and we should add specific documentation for that field in order that test to pass successfully. So here it is. The following parts of the payload were not documented. So this is exactly what is going to force us to always, unlike comments and documentation blocks, which are not always updated, that this should force us to have accurate tests and documentation. Another example here is where we can document the path parameters. So this is a get task requests on cross task ID, and this parameter here we can document it like this. In the generated snippets for get task, we can see the let me find it, the path parameter snippet, and it looks like this. So the parameter task ID and the description for it. I have something similar here for claim task. Anyway, so what we can do with these snippets to use them, we need to have ASCII doctor content document, and I have defined it here. It's the default directory where it should be placed, and this is ASCII doc format where we can we can choose what should go in our documentation. And the advantage over Swagger, for example, is that here I can write as much of chunk documentation as I want, and it would be part of the documentation. So I can add examples, additional examples that would additionally describe the generated snippets. So this to build this documentation into your build configuration. We have added here the ASCII Doctor Maven plugin, and it runs on a package phase. And here I have configured the output to be a HTML5 document. It's called backend, and it will land in this output directory. And also I have added the project version. So for each version of the this module, we would have specific documentation. And this is how the generated HTML looks like. You can preview this in browser, and it looks like this. So very precise and well-structured documentation. We can also generate this in PDF or maybe some other formats. I'm not sure. Something else I wanted to show. Back on the tests here, is that Spring REST docs allows us to generate via mock JSON stubs. These stubs then can be used by the actual consumer of the REST API, and also it can be tested again using these stubs. So for generating these stubs, we need an additional dependency here, and that is Spring Cloud Contract varmock. And then in the tests, only by adding this line here, which is in the document function new varmock snippet, when the test is run, we get this folder here, stubs. And for example, for get tasks, this is how the JSON stub looks like. We can make these stubs available on the class path by publishing them as jars. For doing that, it's also achieved by a Maven plugin, Maven assembly plugin on package phase. And it ended up here. You can see that I have generated stubs jar. It is also available in my Maven local repository. So other projects can use this stub from here. Additional feature by using Spring REST docs is out of the tests we can generate Spring Cloud contracts. If you remember, in one of our some of our previous workshops, Boyan talked about more about consumer contract-driven tests. So only by adding this line here, DSL contract, we get generated Spring Cloud contracts out of the REST documentation, and that is this Groovy script here. So same as for the stubs, these can be make this available on the class path, and they can be used by the consumer of the API. So more or less that is what I wanted you to show. The main benefit I see using Spring REST docs for generating the documentation is that the documentation is always accurate, and we are forced to update it. Along with writing our tests. And this generating the contract is also good option when you have many Spring MVC tests and you want quickly to move on to the DSL contracts. So this is a fast way to do that. So that's all from my side. Any questions?
So a question about a messaging test. Yeah, so I see that in the MVC part, it will realize if you add fields into the response or if you take fields away, I suppose, and then you will get a test failure. But
yes.
We think there's a corresponding driver for sending a message to Kafka or ActiveMQ or someplace that would have similar kinds of features.
As for testing our Kafka messages, I think we would actually use the Spring Cloud contract tests. And these kind of tests are only for the REST API. So in order this to be quick and not to initialize the whole Spring context, I'm using mocks for the services that are added as dependency. But as for as I said, we need a different kind of approach for the testing the Kafka messages.
Okay, yeah, and then the Spring contract can be published in such a way that it kind of forms some documentation about the messages that you can expect to be sent to Kafka and whatnot. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes. Also, here there is a snippet for I didn't show for the contract, and this can also be included in the documentation.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the call have any reactions or feedback or comments? Okay, thank you much. I can stop the recording now and it will go onto SharePoint in the usual place. And maybe if, at the point that you are able to push the code into Git, if you can send an email out with a link there, and then anybody that's interested in a similar kind of code can see what you've done.
Yes, sure.
Okay, thanks everybody for calling into the workshop, and we will chat again next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.